Hi everyone, welcome to today's Trillium webinar on Customer Data Platform, how to choose the right data strategy. My name is Gwen Eki. I'm a Senior Marketing Executive for ANZ in Asia here at Trillium, and I will be your moderator today. Today's speaker, Catherine Valentine, she's our Regional Vice President APJ, focusing on solutions consulting here at Trillium. She's supporting Trillium's customers, prospects, and well-known global brands in unifying their customer data to better connect with their audiences. Catherine's a passionate leader. She's always eager to raise the conversation on customer data platforms. She regularly participates in podcasts, writes blog articles, speaks at conferences, and hosts webinars. So we're super excited to have her with us today. Catherine, I will let you take it away now with the agenda.
Thank you, Gwen, and thank you to everybody who's joined us on the line today. Appreciate you taking the time from Asia through to New Zealand and Australia. I'm really excited to be able to talk a little bit more about Customer Data Platform. I'm expecting that you should be able to walk away from this session with a better understanding of what a CDP or Customer Data Platform is, some tools to help you differentiate between the many different options that are in market. And then we're going to spend a bit of time just looking at, do I choose enterprise customer data for this, or is it marketing customer data that I need to put into my customer data platform? Finally, we're going to end up with some words just around strategy. Do I choose a data orchestration strategy, or is a campaign orchestration strategy better for the business that I work with? And then we're going to just look at some of the additional resources that are available in the marketplace. But before I crack in, I just wanted to, you were obviously presented with a poll as you joined this webinar. Gwen, any responses in terms of why are people actually joining the webinar today?
Yes, so 48% of the audience is here today to hear more details around CDP. 33% of them are actually considering CDP as a project, and 14% of them are already a CDP user, but they want to know more about value and how to use it, and 5% are just replying over, so just interested in hearing more about it.
Okay, fantastic. Look, that's really good to hear. It gives me some context in which to actually give you the kind of things that you are hoping to find in this webinar. So let's just talk a little bit more about Customer Data Platform, or CDP as it's known as a three-letter acronym. It's a confusing category in the marketplace, I think, because it's running really, really hot today. I've spent the last 5 or 6 years explaining to people what is possible through the use of a CDP in terms of bringing efficiencies to businesses and enabling businesses to get growth. And now all of a sudden, many people are coming to me and actually saying, I need a CDP. But then understanding what one is tends to be a little bit of a challenge. So I thought we'd actually start with not what is a CDP, but actually let's take out some of the pieces or some of the other technologies that have existed in the ecosystem that people sometimes interpret as being the function of a CDP. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at 3 prime tools that marketers use today, potentially for the experience layer, the experience that their customers actually get from their brands. I find when looking at new technologies and trying to understand where does this technology fit, that it helps to actually look at the legacy. Where did this technology come from? What was it built to solve? That helps me then understand the sort of things that will be really good for me to use it for in my business. So let's start with CRM. CRM, obviously, it starts with C as well, so maybe a CRM and a CDP are kind of similar. And in some ways, I think this is one of the things we see is that people do get very confused. But a CRM was actually brought to market to enable your business to actually hold a full transactional record of everybody who has purchased a product or a service from you. So it's designed to deal with the customer life cycle from the time that they actually buy something from you. That means it's not dealing with the whole of the life cycle. What it's doing is dealing with the depth of record in terms of what did they buy, what are the products, and how have they interacted with you post-sale. A DMP, on the other hand, the data management platform, is a tool that was actually designed to solve for the early life cycle piece of the relationship. So before I have purchased the product and I'm looking and I'm researching, and maybe I don't even know your brand today, then I might actually be exposed to the capabilities of a DMP to bring me to your site. So a DMP was designed to attract new people who are unknown, and it's based on technology that we know as cookies. So it actually will go out and find additional people who may have an interest in the products or services that I sell, and it will attract them through into the first-party technologies that as a business I use. And then the last piece of that, or the last potential technology that you might think a CDP is a personalization tool. Now really, personalization is there to enable us to test different storytelling and different offers and see which one's going to resonate with either an unknown person or somebody who is an existing customer. CDP is not designed to deal with any of those pieces. It's actually designed to deal with the whole of the life cycle, from first brand touch all the way through to a loyal advocate customer. So let's take a little bit more of a look at the CDP and its evolution. It came to market to solve a problem that the existing stack simply was incapable of solving. And there are certain things because of that it must do to actually enable it to bring the value for growth and for efficiency that we expect out of this technology. So 6 years ago, there were a lot of technologies in the market that businesses were actually building integrations, point-to-point integrations, so that data can flow from, say, a transactional system through to an email solution. Those point-to-point integrations were actually building almost a spaghetti land, if you will, of different integrations. They were high cost in terms of efficiency for growth. So it took organizations a long time to actually build those integrations, and then it cost a lot for IT to support them going forward. Ultimately, also, there were things such as, compliance risk and just a fragility in the stack that having this point-to-point integration was bringing, and we were just seeing a growth in the number of integrations that were being required. So that solution of point-to-point integrations was simply not going to scale, and businesses got more and more places that they were going to touch brands. So CDP was brought to market to solve for this by actually using a traditional hub-and-spoke methodology, where if I can build out a customer data set in the center of all of those tools, and I can actually syndicate a known profile out to all of them, then I can actually get flexibility in the stack that I've previously not known. I can do things like good compliance where I'm ensuring that the consent and privacy mechanisms are being well applied, and I can be timely in the communications that I have with the end customer. So that was what a CDP was brought to market to actually solve. I want to send those customer data profiles out to those end systems so that those end systems can provide a better experience for my customer no matter where they are. That also brings an ability to actually have consistency that I've just never been able to achieve previously. If that's what a CDP is trying to do, then there are 6 things that it necessarily has to be able to do well and has to have. The first is it must be customer-centric. So what I mean by that is that the data that's being collected in this hub needs to center on the customer, it cannot center on the vendor, and it cannot center on the channel. Because ultimately I have to build something that every channel can consume and can make good use of. The second thing I need is real time. Now, real time is a terminology that's highly overused today and is open to interpretation. I simply say that for real timeness, as a consumer, when I'm consuming a brand, I expect the messaging that I receive to be relevant to what I have done right now. If a CDP can enable me to have a relevant message based on the signals I have just sent to brands, potentially cross-screen and cross-property, then you've got a CDP that is real time. Ultimately, obviously, this is customer data we're talking about, so privacy and security just go without saying. It's just something that we need. One of the reasons that CDPs have gained greater impetus in the most recent years is not only do they solve for that point-to-point integration problem that they were historically built for, but we're seeing the rise of machine learning. And with machine learning, I need more timely data. I also need an ability to activate the machine learning capabilities that maybe I've built in-house through my data science, but that struggle to get out into the ecosystem where they can be applied. A CDP is a prime place for the activation of the machine learning potential that businesses are building out today. Then we've got the omni-channel piece, the bringing together of both the on and the offline data, the store data with the digital data, the billing information with the app information, the ability to bring all of that data together in a central point and then distribute it back out in real time is truly powerful to any organisation wanting to get better customer experience. And then finally, a CDP has to be first party in its nature. And the reason for that is ultimately a CDP relies on data, and data is something that the consumer gives me. They give it to me as an organisation because they want a better experience. If I want to ensure that I manage that consent process and that I ensure that I get a respectful, sustainable relationship in terms of that data usage, then I must actually build my CDP out in a first-party manner. So those are the things we have to have when it comes to a CDP. Is there a definition? Well, yes, there is a definition for customer data platforms in the marketplace today. If you refer to the CDP Institute, they have come out with a definition that says that it should be packaged software that can maintain a persistent understanding of a customer, and that must be accessible to all systems. Now, we're going to revisit this definition in a little bit once we've talked a little bit more about, whether or not, how we at Telium see this process, and whether or not that needs a little bit of more expansion so that people can understand the usage of a CDP a bit more. So, let's move into where a CDP is at today. As I said, it's a bit of a confusing market. What we know is that, it's exploded. So when I first started working in CDP for Telium in 2014, there were very few capabilities in the marketplace that called themselves CDP. Now we're seeing that there are almost 100 different technologies that call themselves a CDP. What that tells us is that there is a huge potential for organisations in terms of the capabilities that a CDP brings, because we wouldn't see that many technologies in this space in such a short period of time unless there was a huge potential for the gain in that particular category. One of the things I think it does, though, is when we have so many different technologies that come from so many different places, we run the risk of kind of washing out what does a CDP mean. And we can see that how that plays itself out when we look at the survey that was taken in January 2019, where a series of organisations were actually surveyed to find out, were they using a CDP and have they done so in the past 12 months. Now, those organisations were running Salesforce, Oracle and Adobe, which were all technologies that in January 2019 didn't actually have the CDP capability, and yet 62% of people who were running Salesforce said they were running a CDP. What that tells me is that ultimately the confusion in the marketplace is quite high, and the understanding of what a CDP will bring to an organisation is still to be solidified for many organisations. So to help with that, one of the things that we've done here at Telium is we've released a report, and we will share the link on this report with you at the end of this webinar. We've released a report that drives far deeper into the state of the CDP in the marketplace today. I would strongly recommend, if this is something that you have interest in and researching, that you download this particular document, because it gives you quite a level of insight into not only where does Telium see this fitting, but also what are other people like you in the marketplace thinking about and prioritising when it comes to how and when to buy a customer data platform. So, as I mentioned, Telium's been working in this space since 2014. I remember the first day I ever saw what is now known as a customer data platform, and I realised the potential and power of it. I think in those 6 years, we've done a lot of work to develop the capability, and we've got a lot of understanding of what makes a successful CDP and what brings value to the businesses that we work with in terms of efficiency and in terms of growth. And for us, we take a slightly wider view of how you should define the CDP than maybe CDP institutes. So for us, it's not just about the marketing capability. It's about the free flow of data across the enterprise. So a CDP should enable your organization to have a single point where data can be activated into any of your technologies. For that to happen, for it to be company-wide and for it to fit with any of your stack today or tomorrow, that data set must be agnostic. It must be neutral. It cannot be related to specific channel. It cannot be related to a specific vendor. And ultimately, if I'm going to be able to activate this data with my end business users actually being able to make use of it, it also must be in the language of the business so that they can understand it. The other thing about it is that it must be able to build a persistent understanding of the customer that can go to any technology. And that includes technologies that may not even exist in the stack today. It must actually be built in such a way that for the technologies that we know are coming but we don't know what form they'll take, that it will enable the stack to actually flex for those. And the last piece I would say is we resolve our understanding of a customer in many different ways from all of these different sources, whether it be an app or, via a digital source or through our CRM solutions or our order management capabilities. All of those different tools have different identities. So the capability of the CDP must be to be able to resolve those identities no matter what keys exist and how we address an individual through any of those channels. So, we talked a little bit about CDPs. The thing that powers a CDP is the data. So for us at Telium, one of the things we talk about is a data-first CDP. It's really important that the data that you are working on, that good strategic thought has been given to how much data, what kind of data, how am I going to build my customer data strategy. And the first part of that strategic identification is actually, well, how big is this data set going to be? I mentioned earlier that, we are talking about a data set that will flow freely across any of the enterprise. So while we might want to collect all of the anonymous breadcrumbs that an individual leaves in our digital capabilities early on in their life cycle with us, the page views, etc. We're going to want to combine that with the customer level data that's collected, and these two sets of data, the anonymous data and the customer data, are often the data sets that the marketing organisation considers when they're building a data set for marketing communication. But the truth of the matter is marketing is just the start of the relationship with the customer, and if I'm to truly build a full of life cycle relationship with my customer, then I must include additional data points into this data set so that it's not just marketing, it's support and it's sales, and everybody having consistent conversation with the customer as they go through their life cycle. So I'm going to want to bring in omni-channel data. I'm going to want to bring in my transactional data, potentially my footfall data, my POS data, maybe billing systems, booking systems. On top of that, there's going to be some level of sensitive data potentially that I might consider putting into this capability. Now, how much sensitive data that is actually built out into a CDP depends very much on the risk appetite of the organisation that you actually work with. But one of the pieces that we've seen successfully sort of implemented for the customers that we work with on a long-term basis is that they actually sit down with their whole of business when it comes to the implementation of the CDP, and they agree the data that they're actually going to use within the CDP, so that risk and InfoSec agree that there is benefit to the company for using this data, and that the proper privacy and security constraints are put in place so that that can be achieved in an appropriate manner. So once we've decided as an organisation what data we're going to include in this data set, one of the things that we need to consider as part of that decision-making process is if I only include the customer data and the anonymous data, I can do good communications when it comes to the awareness and the consideration phase. But as I've already mentioned, one of the things I want is to actually be able to have a consistent conversation past that phase, into acquisition, onto ongoing engagement and further upsell and cross-sell. If that is what my business actually wants to achieve as a growth strategy, then I have to be building out a bigger data set within the customer data platform that I am purchasing. So I need a capability that, one, is able to source all of that data, but I also need to be able to be sure that it can also be distributed as it should be. I'm going to use a use case that we're very proud of here at Telium. It was NIB, insurer here in Australia who came to us about 2.5 years ago, very disparate set of technologies, wanting to get a more consistent experience for their customers through to initial policy purchase and then ongoing cross and upsell. One of the things they first achieved with Telium wasn't necessarily a CDP capability per se. It was actually just the recording of 50 million more different events that their prospects and customers were sending them. So when we talk about events, what we mean are all of the signals that consumers, when they touch the brand, they give you. They fill out forms, they touch the website, they maybe install the app. Those are all events, and they're all signals that give me some understanding of their ongoing intent. Now, before Telium was installed at NIB, there were 50 million plus of those signals that were going unheard by the organisation. That's a huge deafness for any organisation. And ultimately, by being able to hear those events and then also being able to build a better lead generation mechanism through listening to the events and through changing the processes, they saw a 90% increase in the qualified leads. There were a number of other downstream impacts and improvements that they saw, and the relationship we have with them is an ongoing one where we are bringing in new sources to the CDP so they can get further growth and further efficiencies. So let's do a recap because I've covered an awful lot in quite a short period of time. We talked a little bit about the difference between the marketing data set and the enterprise customer data set, and I'm hoping at this point you understand that you know, a CDP can make use of more than just a marketing data set. It could just choose to have a marketing data set, but if you choose to want the full of life cycle capability, then an enterprise customer data set is probably going to be where you want to head for. It enables you to fuel a best of breed stack So by having this data sitting in your CDP, you will have the ability to actually feed data to any of your endpoints, not just your marketing capabilities. With NIB's case, some of this data is being fed into bespoke policy systems, etc. It empowers a business to actually have a consistent life cycle with consumers, no matter how they touch the brand. And it also will enable you to get the most out of your understanding of your customer. They say ultimately, the best businesses are the ones who really know and understand their customers and then behave appropriately. That is what a well-built CDP will bring an organisation. And then ultimately it will bring an organisation a flexibility that has previously not been seen. So we talked a little bit about, what is a CDP, what is it not, the kind of data that works well within it. We're going to go back. We've had another poll rolling, and I'm really interested to know, what's the results of the poll, Gwen?
Like the majority of our audience is actually seeing the value for their company. 76% replied yes, 24% no.
Okay, so 74% of you are saying enterprise customer data set probably makes sense for my organisation. And that would be my experience out in the marketplace. So that's probably where we're at right now. There are certainly a lot of questions about, well, how do I build out that customer data set and, what's the strategies that I use? And look, if you want to have that kind of conversation, then that's probably longer than we've got time for on a webinar, but it's certainly something that I and the people that I work closely with here at Telium love having with organisations. So if that's of interest, then certainly reach out. Before we talk about the customer data strategy, though, I think it's worth considering, well, if I get a CDP, how am I going to actually make best use of it? I've already bought a whole lot of technologies. I've bought email solutions and I've bought SMS capabilities. How am I going to actually implement this CDP? There are two different strategies that have sort of become common in the marketplace in how do you implement CDP. One of them is known as data orchestration and the other one is known as campaign orchestration. So what we're going to do now is just actually differentiate between the two capabilities. But first let's talk about what we see in the marketplace in terms of how are organisations formed today. What we tend to see is we talk with organisations where they have already developed a number of capabilities. And those capabilities probably, they might be email service providers or SMS capabilities. A lot of organisations we talk with have already built or implemented things like CRM solutions, personalisation engines, and they're probably using either a DSP or a DMP. And when you start considering a CDP, the question is, how do I actually make use of the tools and ensure that the investment that my business has made in terms of getting those channels to actually deliver messages out to my consumer, how am I going to use a CDP in that market, in that kind of ecosystem? And there are two ways to actually do that. One, you can use a concept called campaign orchestration. And the idea with campaign orchestration is that I build a centralized understanding of my data, and then I will actually distribute that. I will have a central decisioning engine that makes all decisions for all channels at that central point, and then I will simply push out to the end mechanisms for delivery to the customer. And that tends to override all of the enterprise investment into teams and tools that has historically been made. Now, in certain circumstances, that might make sense, but for a lot of organisations, they've already invested in a decentralised model, and they're wanting to know how they best leverage that. The other thing that we know is that decentralisation is actually going to become more commonplace. You can see here in the survey that by 2022, we're expecting decentralisation to have, over doubled what it is today, because ultimately the people who are best placed to be able to actually leverage a particular channel are the specialist employees that you've employed within your within your organization already. So data orchestration as a strategy was brought to bear primarily as part of a response to that. So I've never seen a campaign orchestration system for a big enterprise organization really come to fruition. It's very hard to have a central decisioning engine that can make all of the best and right decisions. Data orchestration, however, is actually looking at it slightly differently. I want to have a specialist tool that is there to collect the data to ensure that I do identity resolution, that I enrich it from all of the signals that I'm getting from all of the endpoints. But then I want to be able to distribute that data simultaneously out to all of the endpoints so that those teams and tools that I've invested in have the best understanding of the customer so that they can utilize their skills to make the best decision on the next conversation with that customer in the channel that they're in right now. And that's what a customer data orchestration strategy is. Centralized storage and push of data into the edge tools so that the edge tools can be fully leveraged for the investment previously made. It tends to empower the teams that you've already got in place. It enables you to be faster to market in terms of being able to actually leverage that investment. As I said, it means that I've got a centralized tool for things that I should actually be administering centrally, such as compliance, privacy, a full customer data set, but then that I am using those endpoint tools to leverage the specialization in channel. So we're pretty much coming to the end of the webinar. I just wanted to go through a few takeaways that I think we should leave you with. The first thing is, it is a confusing market. The CDP, you will find many different CDPs with different capabilities. I would suggest that the first thing you want to do is know what your business is trying to achieve in terms of bringing a CDP capability on within your business. And if you're listening to this webinar, probably you are going to be the person who's talking in your organization about this new capability and being able to articulate the value it brings to the business. Ultimately, it's about ensuring consistent communications with a customer that enable the business to be more efficient and to grow. Ultimately, if you can build that view of customer, you should be looking to build it with the biggest data set that you can actually gather from all of the many systems that you have. And that may mean that you need to bring other people within your business into the conversation to ensure that you can get access to that data and the decisions can be made cross-business. One of the things you'll be looking to do is define a data strategy for that CDP, and I would say that data strategy includes the choice around the kind of data you're going to collect. Are you going to be data orchestration or campaign orchestration? And then what is the overall customer data strategy that you're going to actually carry out? One of the things will be is that as an enterprise needs to grow, a CDP capability is going to be something that becomes more pressing, not less. The more data sources you have, the more places that your consumer touches your brand, the more that you need to scale the communications to not just physical presence, but to consistency across many different electronic capabilities. A CDP is going to become a mandatory capability for any modern technology stack. I think it's the reason that I find it such an exciting place to work is it is the leading edge in terms of this is where businesses are growing and bringing new differential products to market for their consumers. And so it's a very exciting piece of the technological ecosystem to be considering. I think I'm going to finish it up there in terms of giving you some things to think about. I'm kind of hoping that maybe we've got some questions that have come through as I've been talking. Gwen, anything from the Ethernet or the internet?
Yes, so thank you, Catherine, for that presentation. As we said earlier, we're now going to do like questions and answers. So for anybody who's got a question for Catherine, you can still use the Ask a Question feature to get those in, so we can address those. There are a few questions that have come during the webinar. Here's the first one for you, Catherine. How should I determine which data should go in my data strategy?
Look, ultimately, any technology purchase that you are making should relate back to the goals of your organization. So I would say, how do you determine the data that goes into the data strategy? Well, that depends on what is your organization actually trying to achieve as a whole. Look to that first. That will give you good indicators about, how you're trying to engage your customers and therefore what data you're going to need to actually bring that vision to market. So sometimes it's about actually looking at the business as a whole, understanding what the business is trying to achieve, and then using that to generate the basis for the customer data strategy.
Thank you. There was another really interesting question that came through. Is marketing usually the driving force behind the CDP adoption?
Great question. Look, I would say marketers are the ones that tend to be, from a technology point of view, they're the ones who like to try new technologies and are always hungry for different opportunities to actually engage people. I would say that within this, choosing a CDP, it's a wider conversation than just the marketers. So often it's the marketer who will bring us into the conversation in terms of wanting to understand the CDP, and they will make use of the capabilities that a CDP enables in terms of consistent communication. But there are two other groups within any organisation that will get value from the CDP. The first other group is the BI machine learning teams, the data science teams. What they're looking for is they're looking to get access to new, clean, correlated data sets, often digital data sets that historically have been a little bit elusive. And also they're looking for an avenue by which they can activate the value that they have brought, whether that be through their visualization of data or it be through the machine learning models that they've built. So quite often, if marketers are looking to build this technology or buy this technology, they will find allegiance if they talk to their data BI people because there's value there for them. And then the last piece of the puzzle, I'd actually say that IT gets value out of a CDP capability. IT are responsible really for the stability and they're responsible for the risk and compliance piece of any enterprise organisation. And what a CDP enables me to do is it enables me to centralise the management of those pieces in a place where I can uniformly apply certain rules, mandates, and in our region, I think that's particularly important. So quite often I'm talking to organisations in Asia that stretch across more than one geography. So sometimes it's not even about just applying privacy rules for a specific country. It's about being able to apply rules in Singapore, but a different set of rules in Malaysia, or another set of rules, say, in India, for example. So IT have quite a big job, their mandate in terms of ensuring those things are centrally and well managed are quite challenging these days. And so I think they also have an interest in a CDP.
Thank you. We have another question. I'm really glad this one came through because I think it's really important to address. How effective and meaningful is a CDP to B2B companies?
Well, we're a B2B company, so we find it quite meaningful. Again, another great question. Look, some of the organisations I deal with in the region, I'm thinking of a couple of telcos where we're actually working with their B2B arms, not their B2C. So some of the things like lead scoring to understand if somebody about to make a big technology purchase, or how do I ensure that I actually understand that the research that somebody is doing on their phone is related to the research that's being done on on a laptop. I actually think from a communications perspective and a consistency of the customer experience, the relevance of B2B and B2C has become far less. Ultimately, I buy from the people who engage me best, whether I'm buying for my business or whether I'm buying for me as an individual. So I would argue that a CDP is just as relevant, in fact, almost possibly more relevant, because sometimes the purchases are bigger, for the B2B ecosystem as much as for the B2C.
Great. I think we have time for like a couple more questions. The next one that we have that came through is, can you give more details on how the data collection works with Trillium's tool in the data collection chain?
And I think great question. Okay. Okay. But you can say it again. So I'm going to say to this person, you got it in one. So ultimately, CDP is really important, but how I get the data into the CDP is just as important. So I need to be able, if I'm to be able to realize the mandate of real time in a CDP, then the data that's flowing from all of the different sources, whether they be physical, whether they be my operational sources, or some of the new technologies, digital IoT, then I need a replicable, scalable process for onboarding sources no matter where they come from, and I need that process to be really quick. And I need it to be neutral, just like the data set that exists in the CDP. So I would say building your source onboarding strategy and ensuring that you have technologies in place that will enable you to do those things is just as important as choosing the CDP. Trillium has spent, so while we may have spent 6 years working on the CDP capability, our heritage, I talked about heritage at the beginning of the webinar, our heritage is about getting data from many different places, and in a lot of cases it's the new technologies. So we've built capabilities that enable us to easily and consistently get data from digital, from IoT, from databases that are on-prem, and actually get it into the CDP in a timely manner so that it can actually be unified and then distributed back out. So great question. Definitely consider that in your strategy when you're considering the CDP.
Great. And we're going to finish with that question that is like directly linked to the one you just answered on data collection, which is around like data hygiene. Like, how do you ensure you bring data, like quality data in your CDP?
Ooh, biggie. Look, data hygiene, I think, has matured, and I think the CDP is actually changing the way we see data hygiene. I have a bit of a history in data hygiene, so that's partially why I say it. I think in a CDP environment, I think hygiene is important. Ultimately, I'm using the technology to personalize messages across my first-party ecosystem. I need to make sure that the data I'm using is actually going to make the right impression and make the right decisions. But how hygiene is looked at is slightly different from how we might have historically looked at it 15 years ago when we were talking about records that we were wanting to mail to people, for example. So in a digital world, data hygiene is about ensuring that I get good capture at source, that I actually get quality of capture at source, and that the CDP brings me an ability to see that that is happening and a way to detect if I've got data coming into the system and it's not right, that I can detect it and that I can act on it at source. For the legacy systems that I have that, maybe I can't fix the source end, then your CDP should supply you with an ability to do a mapping process so that you can actually address the data quality issues as it flows into the CDP. So yes, data quality doesn't go away. If I want to have good, consistent, knowing conversations with my customer, then the data that underpins that conversation has to be right.
Right, thank you for that. Well, that was all the time that we have today. There are still like a few questions that we were not able to answer live, so we'll follow those up offline. Just want to thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. Catherine, thank you again for your time and walking us through this. I hope you all have like a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone on the phone. Thanks, Gwen.